Good day. So if you asked me 5 years ago on whether a CV is important to pass your job interviews with high-performing companies, I would have outright laughed at you simply because I don't believe that's an essential step in any job interview process, especially towards the end, toward the serious job interviews, towards the job offer, so to speak. Also, I'm often advising candidates not to waste their times redoing their CVs before job interviews because that's not the main thing, right? I often coach people with CVs that do not exist or with CVs that are 40 pages. For instance, many researchers prefer to add a lot of detail in their CVs. And as you can see, I don't invest much into video editing myself here on YouTube simply because I don't believe that's fundamental to my YouTube goals, right? However, I believe there's a threshold in everything, and is more interestingly probably is that expectations evolve over time, and this is what happens also nowadays, now in the era of AI. So what happens here is that in the era of AI, it's super easy to create compelling content, commercial content, so to speak, content that sounds good when you read it, such as CVs. And therefore, I believe that the threshold to make a CV a bare minimum, a viable CV, is raising continuously because of this, right? So actually, how I got the idea to shoot this video is I found one particular CV that caught my attention that, in my opinion, could easily play a detrimental role in the candidate's success, right? So I'm going to point out a number of problems here that you want to pay particular attention to. First is grammar. Okay, so a grammar issue, in the middle of your CV is nothing uncommon. Everyone, not everyone, but most candidates have grammatical issues in their CV at some point. But if you have if you have a poorly formed first sentence in your CV, that will catch someone's attention. For example, dynamic HR professional with experience in a large and mid-sized matrix company. Right? So it should be in large and mid-sized companies. Right? So it's not a grammatically sound statement. And again, this is the opening statement in that CV in a bilingual country. So my advice would be to really pay attention to and fix your grammar using ChatGPT. ChatGPT can easily tell you that this is not a grammatically sound sentence, and it takes you, a few minutes, a few moments to check if your CV is grammatically correct, especially in the opening statement. This, in my opinion, it plays well to your attention of detail. So if you couldn't pay attention to detail in the opening statement of your CV, then chances are, you will that will raise some eyebrows there, right? So this was the first thing, the grammar, especially in the beginning. The second thing I wanted to draw your attention on is many of you build your CVs by yourselves, okay, which is a good thing in my opinion. But when you build your CV by yourself, chances are you will use too many words to say very little. To give you an example here, I'll put it on the screen. It makes little sense to read, a half a page of a CV for generalities, right? So, in my opinion, that's not respectful of your reader's time. When I read a CV, I prefer to read my CVs, the ones that people interact with. I prefer to read their CVs in full. But sometimes those CVs use so many words to say so few things that even I get bored to go through them, to go through it in full, right? So you can imagine someone who has the upper hand in a job interview will not be interested in wasting their time reading something they cannot take any value from, right? So do this simple test. Try to read your CV once in full. Was it worth your time to understand more about that candidate, how they work and what they do. Or maybe you could score a bit better on clarity of thought, right? And I want to highlight here that I'm not suggesting you reward your CVs using AI here. Not at all. I'm just advising you to score better on clarity of thought and to be more respectful of your interviewer's time or whomever is reading your CV, right? The third thing you'd want to pay particular attention to, and which caught my attention again in the CV I was reviewing, as you can see, it's someone in HR, okay, is that it used 0 metrics, right? So it used very long sentences, it used a ton of words to say very little, and it used 0 numbers. I mean, except, maybe some irrelevant numbers that the company or the team was, I don't know, a few hundred people. But it had, it wasn't business oriented. It showed no commercialism in what they do, right? So when you fail to focus on some quantifiable outcomes in your CV, you'll obviously lack a little bit of commercialism. And this is something also, that may catch people's attention, especially if the type of role that you're applying for, and most of roles today require a bit of commercialism. Okay, so metrics, quantifiable outcomes, and it could also go hand in hand with clarity of thought and communicating the idea that you want to transmit more clearly, right? And the fourth thing I'd like to pay particular attention to is something that many people try to cover up some employment gaps in one form or another. That's very much your choice, but you should know that in reality, I like to make a comparison. There's good and bad thieves. You see, there's good and bad people at hiding their tracks. So for example, if you've done nothing for the past 2 years, then you may want to get a little bit more creative around how you sell that in a job interview. Or if you've done, so basically my point is that if you do choose to cover up that experience, those 2 years gap or 1 year gap in your career with something on the lines of independent consultant, well, you should be more specific and to provide a little bit more proof of the type of work or the type of the achievements you had in that context, right? Because it's never as simple as, hey, I've done nothing for the past 2 years. I was just looking for a job, but you were doing some independent consulting work. Okay, you were doing it. In what capacity? What companies did you work with? Who did you advise? What were some interesting outcomes for which you had? It can get as close as you want to an actual job, right? But just saying you are an independent consultant and consulting various small businesses or various individuals and consulting broad statements, that will never sell to someone who reads interviews, who reads CVs and reads candidates for a living, right? So maybe pitch your intention to start a business or something like that, but try to sell yourself better. And keep in mind, there's good and bad thieves with these things. So if you want to hide something, there's very few people who are really good at hiding that thing, and you should seriously consider you could be a lot better off saying how things actually worked, right? So maybe as a conclusion here, you should know that there's even companies, even FAANG companies, which advise certain employees to have their CV made by someone else. And there is a CV writing industry, which I'm not part of, by the way, that you should be aware of. So this also used to be a much larger industry, but now with AI, it's becoming a lot easier for candidates to build some good enough CVs for the job interviews. I see myself many very well made CVs, and I don't think they help people land job offers, but I do think they help people to pass through screening rounds. That I do think the impression is a lot better when you see a professionally made CV. Again, if you have this problem of passing screening rounds, and a professionally made CV may help, right? But all in all, it's all about common sense and realizing that times are changing in the sense that expectations are evolving when it comes to how you interact, the type of content you provide to your interviewers, especially your CV, right? So if 5 years ago it was possible that you have, some mistakes in your CV, nowadays that type of mistake is assumed to be no longer to be under that bare minimum threshold, simply because you could easily check that using AI or using any other tools is just common sense, right? So what is common sense today has evolved with what used to be common sense 5 years ago. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.